The phone rang at 2:03 a.m. on a Sunday. Again. My manager's name flashed on the screen. The fourth time this month. I stared at it, letting it ring. My body already tensing for another emergency that would steal my day off. 3 years of this. 3 years of broken promises, unpaid overtime, and watching good people get crushed by a system designed to extract every ounce of dignity from us. I didn't know it yet. But this call would be the last straw. Within 2 weeks, I'd walk out of Eclipse Distribution Services forever and take 23 others with me. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I used to believe that hard work was enough to get ahead in America. At 32, with a 7-year-old son and a mountain of old student loans crushing my shoulders, I'd learned that belief was just another lie sold to people like me. I let the phone ring out and rolled over in my narrow bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling of our cramped apartment in Iron Creek, Ohio. The radiator clanged its familiar rhythm, competing with the muffled argument from the neighbors upstairs. This place cost me $950 a month, nearly half my take-home pay from Eclipse Distribution Services, where I'd been grinding myself into dust for 3 years. It started as a temporary thing, just something to tide me over after the marketing firm I'd worked for went under. 6 months, I told myself, filling out the application at Eclipse's massive warehouse on the outskirts of town. A year. Tops. The facility sprawled across 40 acres of former farmland, all concrete and corrugated metal under harsh fluorescent lights that never dimmed. Inside, we moved like ants through towering shelves of merchandise, everything from electronics to household goods, all destined for online shoppers who'd never know the human cost of their 2-day shipping. My first day, I'd met Maria Gonzalez at the time clock. She'd been there 5 years, her hands wrapped in compression gloves to fight the arthritis that came from repetitive scanning. "Welcome to the machine," she'd said with a bitter smile. "Hope you brought thick skin." Then there was Marcus Williams, a former high school football star who'd blown out his knee and ended up here after his construction job dried up. Tomas Herrera, who'd driven trucks in Honduras before coming here legally with his family, only to find his commercial license wasn't recognized. Denise Washington, another single mom who worked nights so she could see her kids during the day, surviving on 4 hours of sleep. We were America's invisible workforce, Black, white, Latino, Asian, immigrant, and native-born, all united by one thing: desperation. Eclipse knew it, and they wielded that knowledge like a weapon. The pay started at $15.50 an hour, which sounded decent until you factored in Ohio's cost of living and the mandatory overtime that somehow never showed up correctly on our paychecks. System glitches, they'd say, promising to fix it next pay period. But next period would bring new glitches, new excuses. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Monroe, need you in by 6 a.m. Johnson called out sick." It was 2:17 a.m. My shift didn't start until noon. I thought about Ethan, my son, sleeping in the next room, about the field trip permission slip I couldn't afford to sign, about the birthday party he'd been invited to next week, and how I'd have to make up another excuse for why he couldn't go. The gift would cost too much. Everything cost too much. 3 years ago, I'd walked through Eclipse's doors believing in fair wages for fair work, believing that if I showed up on time, worked hard, and didn't complain, I'd eventually catch a break. Maybe even that supervisor position they'd dangled in front of me during my second month, then mysteriously filled with the district manager's nephew. But Eclipse had taught me the truth about places like this. They didn't want employees, they wanted bodies. Expendable units of labor to be optimized, measured, and discarded when we broke down. And we all broke down eventually. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. In 5 weeks, everything would change. I didn't know it yet. But that water stain on my ceiling would become the last thing I'd remember about the apartment where I'd learned to stop believing in the American dream and start fighting for something real. The first year had broken my body. The second year broke my spirit. By the third year, I'd become exactly what Eclipse wanted, a ghost of myself, moving through their warehouse on autopilot. Peak season 2022 nearly killed us all. From Halloween through New Year's, mandatory overtime became our religion. 60-hour weeks minimum, sometimes 70. The law said they had to pay time and a half after 40 hours, but Eclipse had creative accounting. They'd split our hours across different departments on paper, keeping each below the overtime threshold. When we complained, HR would pull out contracts we'd signed in desperation, full of fine print none of us had understood. I remember the night Ethan got sick, 103-degree fever, crying for his mom. I called Ray Barlow, our floor manager, begging for the night off. "Find someone to cover your shift, or you're getting written up," he'd said. 3 write-ups, and you're gone. Monroe, you know the policy. So I left my fevered child with my elderly neighbor and worked until 4 a.m., checking my phone every 10 minutes. Each text from Mrs. Chen making my stomach clench tighter. When I finally got home, Ethan was asleep on the bathroom floor, where he'd crawled after throwing up. I held him and cried until sunrise, then got up and did it all over again. The cameras were everywhere. Management said they were for security. But we knew better. Get caught talking for more than 30 seconds? Written warning? Lean against a shelf during a 12-hour shift? Theft of company time. Bathroom breaks were monitored, timed, questioned. Women had it worse. God forbid you needed an extra minute for period cramps or pregnancy nausea. They had this points system. Late by 1 minute, half a point. Call in sick, full point. 10 points and you're terminated, no exceptions. The points never expired. After 2 years, I was at 8.5, each day walking a tightrope over unemployment. But it was Luis Ramirez's accident that finally cracked something inside me. Luis was one of the good ones, never complained, always helped others meet their quotas. One Thursday evening, a pallet of microwaves came loose from the top shelf. Safety protocol said wait for the proper equipment, but our supervisor screamed about productivity metrics. Luis tried to secure it manually. The whole thing came down. 40 boxes, each one 20 pounds, cascading like an avalanche. Luis jumped clear, mostly, but his shoulder caught the edge. Dislocated, the medic said. Nothing broken, technically. But Luis couldn't lift his arm above his waist. Eclipse's response? They drug-tested him immediately. Standard procedure, they said. When he passed, they found another angle. The security footage showed him improperly approaching the hazard. His fault. No workers' comp. Worse, they put him on unpaid leave pending a full investigation. I visited Luis at his apartment a week later. His kids were doing homework at a kitchen table held together with duct tape. His wife, Carmen, was mixing flour with water to make tortillas, all they could afford until his investigation cleared. 20 years in this country, Luis said, his arm in a makeshift sling. 20 years playing by the rules, and this is what we get. That night, I started keeping records. Every text demanding overtime, screenshot, every pay stub showing missing hours, photographed, every threatening email from management forwarded to my personal account. I wasn't planning anything yet, just building an instinct that told me to document everything. The psychological warfare was almost artistic in its cruelty. They'd post the schedule Friday night for the following Monday, making it impossible to plan childcare or second jobs. Favorite shifts went to the kiss asses, the ones who never questioned missing wages or safety violations. The rest of us got the scraps. Closing shifts followed by opening shifts. Split days off that meant you never really rested. They played us against each other too. Productivity scoreboards in the break room, ranking employees by units processed. The bottom 10% got performance improvement plans, corporate speak for work even harder or we'll fire you. The top performers got pizza parties, not raises, not respect. Pizza. By late summer 2023, I'd stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. My hands were permanently swollen from repetitive motion. My back screamed every morning. But worse was what I saw in my eyes. The same dead look I'd noticed in Maria, in Marcus, in all the lifers who'd been ground down to nothing. Eclipse hadn't just stolen our labor, they'd stolen our hope, and for 3 years, I'd let them. But Luis's accident had planted something in my mind. A dangerous thought that grew each time Ray Barlow smirked at our complaints, each time HR fed us corporate doublespeak, each time I had to tell Ethan, maybe next month, about something he needed. What if we didn't have to take it? What if the machine only worked because we agreed to be cogs? I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't the only one thinking dangerous thoughts in that warehouse. Revolution always starts with exhaustion. And we were all so very, very tired. The conversation that changed everything happened in the employee parking lot at 11:47 p.m. on a humid Tuesday night. I was sitting in my rusted Honda Civic, too exhausted to drive home, when someone knocked on my window. It was Luis, his shoulders still stiff from the accident 3 weeks earlier. Behind him stood Denise Washington and Tomas Herrera, their faces etched with the same bone-deep fatigue I felt. "We need to talk," Luis said simply. We sat in my car with the windows cracked, speaking in whispers even though the nearest security camera was 50 yards away. Paranoia had become second nature at Eclipse. "They cleared me yesterday," Luis began. "No workers' comp, no back pay for the 3 weeks. But here's the kicker. They offered me a generous return-to-work package. Night shift only, dock worker position, 20% pay cut." "That's illegal," Denise said. "Has to be." "Probably." Luis shrugged. "But you know anyone here who can afford a lawyer?" Tomas spoke up, his accent thick with exhaustion. "My wife, she says I talk in my sleep now. Numbers, always numbers, units per hour, points on my record, dollars missing from my check." We sat in silence, each lost in our own catalog of indignities. Then Denise said something that made my heart skip. "What if we all just left?" "And go where?" I asked. "Every warehouse in town pays the same, treats us the same." "No, I mean all of us. Same day, same time." Her eyes glinted in the parking lot's yellow light. "What happens to their precious productivity then?" It was insane. It was impossible. It was the first thing in 3 years that made me feel alive. "They'd replace us in a week," Tomas said. But I heard the hope bleeding through his pessimism. "Maybe," Luis said slowly. "But a week of chaos during peak season, a week of missed shipments, angry customers, corporate breathing down Ray's neck." We talked until after midnight, voices growing bolder as the idea took shape. Not a union. We'd all seen what happened to union organizers at Eclipse. They found reasons to fire them within days. No, this would be something else. A sudden hemorrhage of workers that would leave them scrambling. "How many would we need?" I asked. "At least 20 to really hurt them." Luis calculated. 25 would be better. The skilled positions, forklift operators, inventory specialists, team leads, they've refused to promote. "I know at least 6 who'd listen," Denise said. "Maybe more." We agreed to feel people out carefully. No group meetings, no paper trail, no digital footprints. Just quiet conversations, person to person, building a network of the desperate and angry. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a secret organizer. A whispered conversation with Maria by the time clock. A careful probe of Marcus's feelings during lunch. Each recruitment was a risk. One word to management, and we'd all be gone. But I'd underestimated how much rage simmered beneath Eclipse's fluorescent lights. Almost everyone I approached didn't just listen, they'd been waiting for someone to say what we were all thinking. Sarah Kim, a quality control specialist who'd been passed over for promotion 4 times while watching managers' kids get hired into leadership roles. James Patterson, a military veteran whose PTSD accommodation requests had been lost 3 times. Amelia Rodriguez, whose pregnancy had been treated like a personal betrayal by management, scheduled for the heaviest lifting despite doctors' notes. We met in small groups, never the same configuration twice. Denny's at 5 a.m., the laundromat on Maple Street, the park where our kids played, speaking in code while pushing swings. "It has to be coordinated," I insisted during one dawn meeting. "Same day, same time, maximum impact." "Email," James suggested. Too traceable. They monitor company accounts. Then how? I'd been thinking about this. We pick a date, everyone memorizes it, no written records, no digital trail. Old school. The date we chose was September 29th, a Friday. It would be the last day of the fiscal quarter when Eclipse would be scrambling to hit targets. The warehouse would be packed with inventory for the fall shopping season, maximum pressure, maximum chaos. What about after? Amelia asked during our final planning meeting. They'll blacklist us. Other warehouses won't touch us. Maybe, I admitted. But what's the alternative? Stay here and die slowly? Luis pulled out his phone and showed us a photo, his daughter's honor roll certificate. She asked me if I was proud of where I worked. You know what I told her? I lied. I said yes. His voice cracked. I'm tired of lying to my kids about why Daddy looks so defeated. That's when I knew we'd really do it. This wasn't about money anymore, or working conditions, or even revenge. It was about reclaiming something Eclipse had stolen, our dignity. 24 people, that's what we had by the end. 24 warehouse workers who decided that unemployment was better than daily humiliation. We had no lawyers, no union backing, no safety net, just each other and a date circled in our minds. September 29th. 5 weeks away. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Dangerous, reckless hope. The kind that could destroy everything or change everything. In my rearview mirror, Eclipse's warehouse loomed like a prison. But for the first time, I could see the walls beginning to crack. The next 5 weeks were the longest of my life. Every shift felt like walking through a minefield, terrified that someone would crack, that management would catch wind of our plan. I became hyper-aware of every security camera, every casual question from supervisors, every lingering look from coworkers I hadn't approached. Communication was our biggest challenge. No group texts, no social media, no emails. We went analog, passing messages like prisoners, a napkin with a time written on it, slipped into someone's locker. Meeting locations shared through kids' birthday party invitations that would never happen. When Tomas needed to change a meeting, his wife, accidentally, called my emergency contact number about a fictional school pickup. I started arriving at 4 a.m., 2 hours before my shift, meeting people in their cars. The conversations were always the same structure: confirm the date, confirm the time, confirm their commitment. Some wavered. My kid needs braces, Robert Tan said one morning, his hands shaking around his coffee cup. I can't afford to lose this insurance. I couldn't blame him. We lost 3 people that way, fear winning over anger. That left us with 21. Still enough to hurt Eclipse, but the margin for error was shrinking. The documentation became my obsession. Every night after Ethan went to bed, I'd organize evidence, screenshots of wage theft, photos of safety violations, copies of denied accommodation requests. I created multiple backups, cloud storage under fake names, USB drives hidden at my mom's house, even old-fashioned printouts in a safety deposit box I couldn't really afford. Why does it matter? Marcus asked during one of our dawn meetings. They'll just deny everything. Maybe. But if we're burning bridges, I want receipts of why we lit the match. 2 weeks before D-Day, paranoia reached fever pitch. Ray Barlow had started making rounds more frequently, his piggy eyes scanning faces like he could smell dissent. A new policy required all personal phones to be left in lockers during shifts. They said it was about productivity. But we knew better. I developed a system. Each member of our group had a code phrase that meant, I'm still in. Mine was asking about overtime opportunities. If someone didn't use their phrase during a shift, we'd know something was wrong. Sarah Kim almost blew everything. She'd applied to other jobs and accidentally listed Eclipse as her current employer. When HR called for a reference check, she panicked, thought we'd been discovered. I found her hyperventilating in the bathroom, ready to confess everything to save her own skin. They don't know anything, I told her, gripping her shoulders. It's just a routine check. Breathe. We switched her code phrase to asking about her kids, something that would seem natural. But the close call rattled everyone. 1 week out, I wrote the email. the one that would go to local news stations, the Department of Labor, and Eclipse's corporate office. I poured 3 years of rage into those paragraphs, but kept it professional. Facts, figures, documentation. Let the evidence speak. I showed it to Luis in the parking lot. He read it on my phone, his face grave. Add the part about the miscarriages, he said quietly. What? Carmen's friend, Alicia. She lost a baby after they denied her light-duty request, made her keep lifting boxes at 8 months pregnant, and Jennifer from receiving. Same thing last year. I added it. The email grew to 3 pages, then 4. Each person in our group had stories that deserved telling. 3 days before, I prepared Ethan. Not with the truth, he was too young to carry that weight. But I told him Mommy might be changing jobs soon, that things might be tight for a while, but would get better. Will you be happier? He asked, looking up from his dinosaur coloring book. The question broke me. When had my 7-year-old learned to read the misery I tried so hard to hide? Yeah, baby, I'll be happier. The final meeting happened at 5 a.m. on September 27th, 2 days before our exit. All 21 of us crammed into the back room of a 24-hour laundromat. The owner, Mrs. Nakamura, was Denise's cousin. She kept watch while we talked. Everyone memorized the time? I asked. Nods all around. 10 a.m. sharp, mid-morning, when the warehouse would be in full swing. Phones. Charged and ready, James confirmed. Everyone would record their exit if possible. Evidence for the lawyers we couldn't afford but might need. Second thoughts? Silence. Beautiful, determined silence. I handed out slips of paper, not with our plan, but with contact information for food banks, emergency assistance programs, pro bono legal clinics, resources we'd all need in the coming weeks. Whatever happens after Friday, I said, looking at each face, we did this together. They can't take that from us. Luis raised his coffee cup. To the Eclipse 21. To freedom, Denise countered. We toasted with gas station coffee and convenience store energy drinks. A ragtag army preparing for war. In 36 hours, we'd either be heroes or unemployed idiots. But at least we'd be something Eclipse had tried to stop us from being. Human. I drove home as the sun rose, my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in years. In my purse sat the resignation letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. 24 words that would end 3 years of hell. I resign effectively immediately. My employment at Eclipse Distribution Services has become detrimental to my health, safety, and human dignity. Rachel Monroe. 1 day, 19 hours, and counting. September 29th arrived like any other day at Eclipse. Gray dawn bleeding through the warehouse skylights. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with cardboard dust. The eternal hum of conveyor belts already grinding away. I clocked in at 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes early as always. Punctuality was a habit I'd keep until the very end. The morning crawled by in surreal slow motion. Every ordinary moment felt loaded with significance. Luis nodded at me from across the floor, his code phrase already used. Denise's fingers drummed against her scanner, nervous energy she couldn't quite contain. One by one, I heard the code phrases ripple through the warehouse. Any overtime this weekend? How are your kids? Looks like rain later. 21 confirmations that we were still doing this. At 9:30, I excused myself to the bathroom and set up my phone to record, tucking it in my chest pocket with the camera barely visible. Others were doing the same. We'd agreed, document everything, but don't be obvious about it. 9:45. I returned to my station and pulled up my personal email on my phone one last time. The draft sat there, ready to send to 12 different recipients. My finger hovered over send, but I waited. Timing was everything. 9:55. Around me, I could sense the shift in energy. People were finishing their current tasks, not starting new ones. Sarah Kim was meticulously organizing her workstation. Marcus had stopped at the water fountain for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. We were satellites slowly aligning into position. 9:58. I walked to the center of my section, where I could see Ray Barlow at his desk through the office window. He was scrolling through his phone, oblivious. My heart hammered so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. 9:59. I pulled out my resignation letter, unfolded it carefully. Around the warehouse floor, 20 others were doing the same. Some had typed theirs. Others, like Tomas, had handwritten them in careful script. All different words saying the same thing. Enough. 10 a.m. I hit send on the email. The whoosh sound seemed to echo in the sudden stillness. Then I started walking toward the office, letter in hand, not running, not storming, just walking with the kind of purpose I hadn't felt in 3 years. The first few seconds, nothing seemed different. Then Barlow's phone buzzed. Then his computer pinged. Then both started going off like slot machines hitting jackpot. His face went from confusion to shock to rage as he realized what was happening. By the time I reached his office door, he was on his feet, his face purple, behind me. I could hear the sound I'd been dreaming about, the warehouse floor going quiet. Not the usual quiet of people working, but the profound silence of people stopping. "What the hell is this?" Barlow snarled, waving his phone at me. I placed my resignation letter on his desk, my hand surprisingly steady. "My notice, effective immediately. You can't just..." He stopped mid-sentence, looking past me. Through the office window, we could both see them. 20 people, walking in different directions but with the same destination, out. Some were removing their safety vests, folding them neatly and placing them on workstations. Others were pulling off their Eclipse badges, leaving them on supervisors' desks. "This is coordinated," Barlow screamed. "This is illegal. It's conspiracy." "It's 21 people deciding they've had enough on the same day," I said calmly. "Coincidence?" He lunged for his desk phone, probably to call security, but it was already ringing. Corporate, I'd bet. They'd be getting my email right about now. All 4 pages of documentation, all 3 years of grievances, all 21 reasons why their Iron Creek facility was about to grind to a halt. I turned and walked out of his office. Behind me, Barlow was screaming threats about lawsuits, about blacklists, about never working in this town again. But his voice was drowned out by something more powerful, the sound of footsteps. 20 pairs of feet walking toward freedom. The security guards at the main entrance looked confused, unsure whether to stop us or just watch. James Patterson solved their dilemma by walking up to the senior guard, a decent guy named Carl who'd always treated us with respect. "Morning, Carl. 21 of us are leaving, resigned properly, letters delivered. We'd appreciate it if you'd just let us go, peaceful-like." Carl looked at our faces, then at his younger partner who was reaching for his radio. "Stand down, rookie. They're not stealing anything but their dignity." We walked out into the September morning, and I swear the air tasted different, cleaner, lighter. Behind us, we could hear the chaos beginning. Barlow's voice over the intercom demanding all hands to stations. The skeleton crew of workers who weren't part of our group trying to figure out how to handle 21 people's worth of work. In the parking lot, we gathered one last time. Nobody cheered or celebrated. We just stood there, looking at each other, understanding the weight of what we'd just done. Some were already on their phones, starting the job hunt that would consume the coming weeks. Others were hugging, crying, releasing 3 years of suppressed emotion. "Now what?" Amelia asked. "Now we face whatever comes next," I said. "But we face it as people, not machines." Denise held up her phone. "Local news wants a statement. Says they got an anonymous tip about a mass resignation." We all looked at each other. "Anonymous tip?" "Right." "Tell them we'll talk," Louise said. "But not today. Today, we just breathe." As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror one last time. Eclipse Distribution Services looked smaller somehow, less imposing, just a big metal box full of stuff that needed moving. And for the first time in 3 years, that wasn't my problem anymore. My phone buzzed with messages from the others, job leads, encouragement, plans to meet up next week. We'd walked out separately, but we'd never really walk alone again. The Eclipse 21. We'd done it. We'd actually done it. The aftermath hit like a tsunami. Within 2 hours of our exit, Eclipse's corporate damage control team descended on Iron Creek like locusts. By evening, local news vans were circling the warehouse perimeter, trying to get statements from workers still inside. The first threat came via certified mail on Monday morning. A cease and desist letter from Eclipse's legal team, thick with intimidating language about tortious interference and conspiracy to disrupt commerce. They demanded we retract our statements and sign NDAs retroactively, or face litigation. "They're scared," Luis said when we gathered at his apartment to discuss it. "This is what panic looks like in corporate speak." But the threats escalated. Denise got a call from her landlord. Eclipse's HR department had contacted him. Concerned about her employment status, Marcus discovered his car loan company had received a similar call. They were trying to destabilize us, make us desperate enough to recant. What they didn't expect was the media attention. My anonymous email had included enough documentation that journalists couldn't ignore it. The story broke on Tuesday. Mass resignation at Eclipse Distribution highlights workplace conditions. By Wednesday, it was statewide news. Ray Barlow became the fall guy immediately. Eclipse suspended him, pending investigation, throwing their middle manager under the bus to protect corporate. But we had receipts showing every abusive policy came from above. I fed these to Rebecca Martinez, an investigative journalist who'd been tracking warehouse conditions across Ohio. The warehouse itself was hemorrhaging. They'd managed to hire temps through an agency, but productivity crashed. Holiday season orders were backing up. A former coworker still inside texted me photos of the chaos. Pallets stacked wrong. Inventory systems corrupted because no one knew our specialized procedures, shipments going out late or to wrong addresses. Then came the first victory. Thursday afternoon. Eclipse announced they were restructuring their Iron Creek facility management. But buried in the corporate speak was real change. Shift schedules would be posted 2 weeks in advance. The point system was being re-evaluated. Over time, pay discrepancies would be audited and corrected. They blinked, James said when we read the announcement together. They actually blinked. But corporate wasn't done with us. Private investigators started showing up at our homes, asking neighbors about our characters and political affiliations. One followed Sarah Kim to her kid's school. Another photographed Tomas at his new job interview. That's when the lawyers found us. Not Eclipse's lawyers, ours. A labor rights firm from Columbus had seen the news coverage. They worked on contingency, saw a clear case for systematic wage theft and retaliation. Document everything, attorney Patricia Williams told us at our first meeting. Every contact, every threat, every penny they owe you. The warehouse workers still inside began reaching out. The skeleton crew was burning out, working 60-hour weeks to cover our absence. Some wanted to know how we'd organized it. Others just wanted to vent. We listened to all of them. 2 weeks after our exit, OSHA showed up at Eclipse, then the Department of Labor, then the State Attorney General's office. Our documentation had triggered a cascade of investigations. Every photo of safety violations, every screenshot of wage manipulation, every record of denied accommodations, it all mattered now. Eclipse tried to control the narrative. They issued press releases about their commitment to worker welfare and isolated incidents that don't reflect company values. But more warehouses were paying attention. Workers in Columbus, Cincinnati, even out of state, started sharing their own Eclipse horror stories. Ray Barlow, desperate to save himself, flipped. He reached out to me through Rebecca Martinez, offering to testify about pressure from corporate to cut costs by any means necessary. He had emails, recorded calls, proof that every cruel policy came from executives who'd never set foot in a warehouse. I was just following orders, he whined during our one meeting. They said hit the numbers or hit the road. So did we all, I told him. The difference is, we finally chose the road. The Eclipse 21 became something bigger than us. Sarah Kim started a blog documenting warehouse worker experiences. Luis and Denise began organizing meetings for current Eclipse employees, teaching them their rights. I kept feeding information to journalists, becoming an unofficial spokesperson for a movement I'd never intended to start. 3 weeks after our resignation, Eclipse announced a company-wide compensation review and workplace culture initiative. They offered us our jobs back with raises, full benefits, and back pay for all disputed wages. We declined, all 21 of us. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I told the HR executive who called personally. We're not interested in being bought. We're interested in being heard. By the end of October, 7 more Eclipse facilities had seen mass resignations. Not as dramatic as ours, but steady bleeding of their best workers. Stock prices dipped. Corporate bonuses were frozen. The machine was sputtering. The investigations were just beginning. The lawyers were building their case. Other warehouses were taking notes. And somewhere in a boardroom, executives were learning what happens when you push people past their breaking point. We'd lit a match. Now we watched it spread. The press conference happened on a cold November morning, 6 weeks after we'd walked out. I stood at a podium in the community center, looking out at a room full of cameras and reporters. Behind me stood the Eclipse 21, minus 3 who'd already moved out of state for new jobs. I'd written and rewritten my statement a dozen times, but when the moment came, I spoke from the heart. I'm not here to become famous, I began, my voice steady. I'm here because my 7-year-old son needs to know his mother didn't stay silent when silence was the easier choice. I told them about Luis's shoulder, about denied pregnancy accommodations, about the systematic theft of wages and dignity. I named names, cited policies, provided evidence. But mostly, I talked about what breaks inside a person when they're treated like machinery for too long. We didn't coordinate a conspiracy, I concluded. We coordinated our humanity. The questions came fast. Was I worried about retaliation? No, they'd already done their worst. Would I recommend others follow our example? Each person had to make their own choice. What was next for the Eclipse 21? We're moving on, I said simply. But we're not moving backward. Within a month, Eclipse settled, not just with us, but with a class action suit representing over 800 current and former employees. The number was sealed, but workers started receiving checks for stolen overtime, real money, rent money, dignity money. The warehouse industry took notice. Competitors started advertising better than Eclipse working conditions. State legislators introduced bills about schedule predictability and wage theft penalties. The iron grip loosened, just a little. I never returned to warehouse work. Using the settlement money, I enrolled in community college, studying labor relations. Some called it ironic. I called it education earned the hard way. Luis started his own moving company, hiring Eclipse refugees. Denise became a union organizer. Marcus went back to construction with accommodations for his knee. Sarah Kim's blog evolved into a nonprofit supporting warehouse workers' rights. We scattered but stayed connected, bound by what we'd survived and what we'd done. The group Silent No More grew beyond us. Chapters sprouted in other cities, providing resources for workers afraid to speak up. We'd created something we never intended, a movement that outlived its moment. Eclipse Distribution Services still operates in Iron Creek. They never fully recovered their efficiency after we left. Ray Barlow works at a used car lot now. I saw him once at the grocery store. He looked away. I moved to a smaller town an hour away. Somewhere Ethan could have a yard and I could have quiet. The apartment with the water-stained ceiling became someone else's temporary stop. I hope they don't stay 3 years. Sometimes journalists still call, wanting to know about the woman who led 23 people to freedom. I correct them every time. Nobody led anybody. 21 people just got tired on the same day. At the same time, in the same way. That's what scares companies like Eclipse the most. Not unions or laws or bad publicity, but the possibility that one day their workers will simply decide they've had enough. Together, all at once. Last week, Ethan brought home a school project about heroes. He'd written about me. Not because I'd made the news or fought a company, but because I'd kept my promise. I was happier. We were happier. Was it worth it? He asked me that night, serious beyond his 8 years. I thought about the fear, the uncertainty, the nights I'd stayed awake wondering if I'd ruined our lives. Then I thought about the morning I walked out of Eclipse, how the air tasted like possibility. Every single day, I told him. The Eclipse 21 never set out to change the world. We just wanted to change our own small corner of it. But sometimes that's how revolution happens, not with manifestos or grand plans, but with ordinary people who reach their limit and refuse to be pushed any further. We didn't destroy Eclipse distribution services. We did something far more dangerous. We remembered we were human, and then we reminded them. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or experiences. Your voice matters, and together, our stories can make a difference.